Here's why PANDAS and PANDAS isn't just about the infection, and here's what you actually need to know to help your kid long term. Me and Dr. Lauren are going to chat all about neuro rehab aspects, talk about underlying mechanisms, looking at the big picture of what's going on with these kids so you can have a much clearer understanding, because we find so often that parents have no real clue of the actual scope or understanding of what is fully going on with their kid when they have this going on. So that's what we're going to chat about today. Let's dive into it. PANDAS. We know the underlying mechanism a lot of times is triggered by some kind of infection, blah, blah, blah. But what are the other mechanisms that parents never get told about that's going on that we should start with?
Well, I remember when I first started here, he talked about how kids with PANS or PANDAS often present like they've had a concussion. Essentially, there's an injury, or there's significant enough stress in their nervous system that there are motor signs. They have primitive reflexes that maybe come back or never fully developed, or their balance centers are off, or their eye tracking's really disrupted. And that's largely due to the basal ganglia, the part of the brain affected through PANS and PANDAS, or most affected through PANS and PANDAS, has so much to do with movement. And it was once theorized that the basal ganglia was only movement related, but now they know there's a lot of limbic components. So emotional regulation, there's a lot to do with our attentional networks through the associative cognition, working memory. And so when we rehab, it was once thought only movement. So basal ganglia is still primarily movement related, and really sequencing those movements and motor timing, and that includes eye tracking. And so when we do a full assessment and we see these kids with behavioral issues or attentional issues, there's almost always motor deficits that are measurable. And so when we do a digital eye assessment or a balance assessment, or checking reflexes, or head writing and vestibular function, there's almost always something to work on. And when we develop those systems, and when we retrain and rehabilitate those areas of the nervous system, long-term, that does lead to better attention, focus, behavior, is because you're retraining this motor component, which it largely is motor related, or that the part of the brain is largely motor related. So I think that's when people are doing, let's say, IVIG, or they're doing antibiotics to try to fight this, they're really missing, or they may be doing some detox, or some sort of mitochondrial support if they're lucky. They're still missing that motor rehab component. And I think that's really what you really connected those dots before anyone else. Hey, it's not right brain, it's not left brain, it's metabolic, it's inflammatory, and it's these motor systems that need to be rehabbed.
Yeah. And what I see is, or what I've seen over and over again is, they get an infection, and that's, a lot of times their care stops at that of like, oh, we treated the infection, but that's not the problem. The infection is a problem, but it's what started the problem. The problem is it dysregulated the immune system. The problem is it started cross-reacting with the brain. It started creating neural inflammation, which created a mitochondrial disruption, which then now we don't have energy to develop. Now we have so much neural inflammation, oxidative stress, that we start getting injuries to these cells. Now they start to die off, or they start to get apoptosis. They start to have these mechanisms, but then we start seeing all the neurological consequences that happen from lack of appropriate brain function. And that's returning of primitive reflexes. That's balance centers that get dysregulated, like you said there. And if those things aren't addressed, especially starting from that neural inflammatory aspect of getting that inflammation down, getting that mitochondria to function well again, then we can start working on rehabbing these systems. That's where I see, honestly, the biggest changes by doing those things. Like even in my own son, he had PANDAS. We tried treating the infections. He did horrible. But then when we went back and we just refocused on, let's get inflammation down, let's get energy back to the brain, and let's start retraining some of these systems, he started to heal really, really quickly. And long-term has done better than nearly every kid that I've seen that hasn't done that same program. And I feel like when we do that sequence of events with kids that come in, they do fantastic. And yes, it does take a little bit of time for sure, but they crush it.
My question is, I urge people to ask the question, why can one kid get a strep infection and not develop these behavioral issues? Why could one kid get an infection and not develop these motor deficits, these attentional issues? And that child has better mitochondrial function. The child that is more resistant to stress has healthier mitochondria. when the brain has healthy mitochondria, I mean, there's 100 billion brain cells, 80 to 100 billion per kid, and they all need to make energy for themselves. And when they don't, we have challenges, we have symptoms, we have behaviors, we have diagnosis. And so I think one thing that Infinity does a great job of is looking at a child holistically and say, hey, like these are the labs, these are the environmental factors, these are the digestive health, the overall mitochondrial function, all these other variables that really all relate to how healthy or how efficiently can this child's brain make energy. And when that is appropriate, they're more resistant to stress. When that is not appropriate, stresses like infections can hit them a lot harder and cause these symptoms, cause these behaviors that other kids just simply don't have.
Yeah. And I think it's something to go off of that point, as well as looking at like the cumulative load as well, because like, you know, yeah, you can get exposed to strep infection, your body takes care of it. And like, I'll just use my own son as an example of it all started after we went to a trampoline park and he fell really hard and he hit his head. And so he probably got a concussion that started it. Then he had a mold issue. Then at the same time, he had a strep infection. It was like all these things that just happened at once. And sometimes there's that perfect storm of events that happen that trigger this. But then I often think back of like, you know, what happened early on? Did anything go on where he wasn't getting enough antioxidants, or was it a mitochondrial dysfunction, which I personally have a mitochondrial dysfunction. So maybe there's a genetic component there as well, because like he eats super healthy, all those things, but always looking at of like, was there multiple events that went on? What's that cumulative stress? Is there genetics playing into it? You know, I've tested genetics. He has susceptibility at a higher rate to mold than other kids do or other people do. And so figuring out some of those deeper underlying issues for long-term success is also really helpful.
I think that could be applied to our children with autism that we also see. Just what causes autism? Well, there's so many different things. And some studies might say environmental. Some studies might say oxidative stress. Some might point to the connection between the gut-brain axis and infections and injuries and autoimmunity, and all of those things are things that disrupt mitochondria. And so that could all be funneled into, hey, how is this affecting energy production within the brain? When mitochondria stress, they throw up red flags. Mitochondrial DNA is different than our own. And so when they start throwing red flags, they leach out their DNA and their RNA, which should always be contained within the cells. It should never be exposed to the nervous system, our immune system. Our immune system should never see mitochondrial DNA because it should be within the mitochondria, should be within the cells. When mitochondria start to stress, and all of those things that we've talked about, stress mitochondria, they let out their DNA and let out their RNA, and the immune system says, what's this? And it starts to build antibodies against those proteins which are around there. And if we're talking about the nervous system, that always happens in the areas of the brain that are either injured or the areas of the brain that had the highest demands of energy production: basal ganglia, cerebellum, and the frontal lobes. And so when those mitochondria throw out red flags, those antibodies those immune cells are triggered. That's where that autoimmunity can be triggered. And so you have to look at things holistically. It's not just the infection, it's injury, it's environmental health, it's digestive health, it's antioxidant capacity and oxidative stress capacity. And so it's so comprehensive.
And it's not just a right brain, left brain. When it's a true metabolic neuroinflammatory issue, it's going to be whatever, like you said, the most metabolically active areas of the brain at that time. It's going to be the entire brain. It's not going to be just one area, one side, one hemisphere, one area of the cerebellum. You're going to see, when you do a neurological exam, you're going to see dysfunctions in multiple different areas, or a lot of different areas in most of these cases. And there might be an underlying imbalance below that. But once you clear up the underlying energy production, neuroinflammatory issue, get that regulated, now you might start seeing that imbalance more, and you can be more specific with that. But it's never the first place we start.
So let's get into what helps mitochondria.
Ooh.
Yeah. Like what can we do? What can parents do?
So number one is they can't be stressed out all the time. So we need to have a high amount of antioxidants. Like we need to make sure we have appropriate levels of glutathione, vitamin D levels being appropriate, vitamin A and E, and we need to make sure that we have plenty of just antioxidants. That helps that quench that oxidative stress. So they don't get overwhelmed. And so many kids are depleted in antioxidants. They just don't get enough in a day. Decreasing overall neural inflammation so we don't keep having a breakdown of those mitochondria. And then we use obviously laser therapy a ton because that upregulates mitochondria. And most importantly is making sure we're getting kids out moving, getting enough oxygen, activating that system. And when we activate those neurons, we get recoupling of our mitochondria. So we get better function of that mitochondria and get that to more or less turn back on when they get shut down. So I would say those are the simple, basic, easy things to do. What about you?
Sleep too.
Sleep for sure.
I ask a lot of parents, hey, how many hours are they sleeping? 8 or 9. Like most kids that we see need 10, 11, sometimes 12 hours of sleep, especially when they, I guess a common pattern we see with kids with PANDAS is, hey, they can go to school, they can suppress, they can inhibit. And then when they're fatigued, when their blood sugar starts to decrease, or when they come home and they've been suppressing and inhibiting all day in class, then they melt down, or the behavior disrupts, or they have these attitudes when they get home, or they just crash when they get home. And so sleep is so big for these kids, just to help them heal and support mitochondria for the next day. And
if you're not getting enough sleep, your blood sugar is going to get dysregulated anyways, which is going to be a massive fuel to that fire.
A lot of kids with PANS and PANDAS are really sugar addicted. They're looking for that dopamine, whether it's through food or addictive foods, devices, feedback, involvement, or the reactions from parents or reactions from siblings. They're seeking that dopamine, but we get so much dopamine from sugar. And that's such a roller coaster for those kids. Is they're seeking out sugar, they're getting it, their blood sugar goes way up, it crashes. That's one of the most inflammatory things to our nervous system. Mitochondria can't stand that stuff, and so they never really develop the energy production efficiency without sugar, because they're so hooked on that roller coaster.
Right, and they never build up our mitochondria. They function really well in ketones. They function really well in fat. They function really well with protein. They function and when they're only getting sugar, that's going to create a scenario where they're massively deficient in energy. And I'm not saying this is for everyone, but like when my son was really going through this, I put him on a modified ketogenic diet, like a really high fat, high protein, lower carbohydrate diet. And I think that was one of the biggest things that changed his life really fast. And of course, that's not for everyone. Talk to your providers about that and whatnot. And I knew what I was doing. I was really specific about it and making sure I'm measuring everything appropriately and monitoring a lot of stuff during that process, make sure that we did it safely and effectively. But but making sure that they have that fuel for their brain to develop. Having ketones in your system is one of the most anti-inflammatory things that you can do. And lots of research to support that, but making sure that they're able to get nutrients that can create energy for that mitochondria, so their mitochondria can function appropriately, is vital.
One marker we see on the NeuroZoomer for a lot of kids with PANS and PANDAS and autism is anti-rage, which says, hey, like there's blood sugar dysregulation, they're glycosylating these amino acids, or they basically have just chunks of sugar and protein floating around, and those are so inflammatory. They're building antibodies against it that cross-reacts with the nervous system, and so that's why that's measured on that lab. But
yeah, and it's wild because that's what, if people don't know what that is, that's also a marker for Alzheimer's, because it's known as type 3 diabetes. Like Alzheimer's is known as type 2 diabetes because blood sugar is one of the biggest disruptors of that, of just normal brain function in general.
I think that's an excellent point. A lot of things that are disruptive for neurodevelopment are also highly prevalent in our neurodegenerative population. And so a lot of what we are talking about now can be applied to people with neurodegenerative conditions.
Literally everything we just talked about.
Hyperbaric, nutrition, exercise. Yeah. Literally everything. Yeah.
That is crazy to think about. The same exact things are the same problems for all neurological issues.
We really specialize in children, and that's really gratifying work, but adults do really well here too.
Oh, yeah, they do.
The same rehab strategies, their balance centers are disrupted. They have tremors, they have, anxieties. And so a lot of similar symptoms, and mechanisms that are, we're talking about people. We're talking about one organ within those people. And so the brain needs support throughout our entire life. And so this isn't just kids. This is adults too.
Okay. So in your opinion, from a kid comes in with PANDAS, parent has no clue what to do. Where should they start? What tests should they run? Give them 3 simple things that'll make a big change for their life.
3 simple things: nutrition, physical activity, and sleep. I mean, those are the essentials for everyone.
Yeah. Get rid of electronics. That'd be my 4th.
Yeah. And if we're doing all those things, and those are baseline necessities, what other strategies can we then implement to like add to that, to really support the healing process, to really support the rehabilitation, to really see change? Give me 3 things that you would add to those base necessities.
I would do laser therapy. I would do hyperbaric oxygen therapy because those will get more oxygen to the system. System can function better. Laser therapy is going to upregulate mitochondria, and I'd make sure they're getting plenty of antioxidants. That'd be my next phase. For
sure. Well, and one quick thing is like people see, we're talking about autoimmunity. If that hasn't been made clear, we're talking about neurological autoimmunity, antibodies made against proteins in the brain. One beautiful thing about that is when that blood-brain barrier heals, you can keep those antibodies out. When inflammation goes down, those T regulatory cells say, "Hey, immune cells, chill out. Like this is your own brain. Like let's calm down here." When mitochondria are functioning more appropriately, you're not throwing out those red flags, bringing the immune system to those stressing areas. And so I don't know if we can ever fully heal or stop autoimmunity, but there's a lot of things you can do to calm it down and support a child. And I think we all have some degree of this throughout our entire life. And so that kind of opens up another question, like why can't a parent be exposed to mold and get a strep infection and maybe not have near the changes as their child? Well, those networks, those cells, those areas of that child's brain aren't fully developed. And so they're just more susceptible to stress. And so whatever that stress is, it's going to hit them harder.
And antioxidant capacity of an adult is so much higher than a child. So I think that's another important mechanism to think about too.
For sure. So nutrition, sleep, physical activity, lasers, hyperbaric, and antioxidant.
Yep. And if you can't get antioxidants into a kid, maybe they won't take a supplement. We have endogenous antioxidant systems. Those get activated through stress. Exercise is a way to increase antioxidants. Warm saunas, hot exposure, cold exposure. Those are ways to create endogenous antioxidants. And that's why saunas have been shown over and over again to decrease rates of neurodegenerative disorders. Same with cold therapies because we produce more antioxidants. So if you can't get them in, go in the sauna with them. Go, obviously careful and not too long and all those things, blah, blah, blah. But those are things you can do. You can get them to exercise, get them to move. You can put their hand in a cold bucket of water. You can put their, splash cold water on their face, put them in a cold shower. Like those are things that you can do to naturally do that. And, some of them you can do, some you can't. Obviously, like my son, he loves getting in the cold plunge with me. I'll go do it. And then he'll want to do it right after. He'll make it 10 seconds.
Got that brown fat.
Yeah, he's got that brown fat. He'll make it 10 seconds. But also I'm like, this is great for his brain. I know it's stimulating antioxidants endogenously, which is great.
One thing you touched on, I'll keep it brief, was genetic susceptibility and genetic capacity. And so with our genetic labs that I ran all 3 of my boys, I found out, hey, how do we methylate? How do we detoxify? How do we make endogenous antioxidants, glutathione? Do we have any predisposition to neural inflammation? And so when I know all those things, those are things that I can control. And I know hey, my 5-year-old's not a good candidate for contact sports. He's got some neural inflammation and genetics that he's just not a good fit for that. And so I'm not going to encourage that. And I need to support his glutathione. He needs fish oil. He needs methylated folate every day. And so there's a lot of proactive things that I can do to make him more resistant to stress along the way. And I wouldn't have known that without running that lab and really taking that step. And so it's not a necessity for everyone to run that, but if you want to know, if you want the data,
cheapest way to know.
It really is.
And you only have to run it once.
It really is. And when we have these genetic mutations, technically, like we don't detoxify as well. We don't make energy as well. We don't methylate B vitamins well. And so there's a lot of mitochondrial components to our genetics. So just something to be aware of for parents is run that lab. It's a couple $100, know how to support your kid, and then take those steps daily.
Yeah. And if you're a parent out there and you are looking, if this resonates with you, you're looking for help, go to my Instagram and just DM me help. And my staff will kind of guide you in the right direction from there. Really easy way to get a hold of us there, or just call our office. But easiest way is just jump on Instagram, follow us, and message us. Cool. Hope this helps all y'all. Have an awesome day. Talk to you soon.